everyone. A good afternoon and a very warm welcome to you all. I am Sejal, associated with Cyberprat as the operations lead, and I welcome you all to the very first Wednesday Wisdom session. So, Wednesday Wisdom is a webinar series that we at Cyberprat are doing with our association partner, Onefede. So, with Wednesday Wisdom, we would like to demonstrate the best of breed next generation technologies which enable your business to transform digitally, acquire compliance, and more importantly, mitigate the upcoming cybersecurity risk. So for the today's webinar, we have with us Prophase. So Prophase's cloud-native security solutions protect web applications from OWASP top 10 and layer 7 DDoS attacks by using proprietary adaptive AI ML algorithms, which integrate seamlessly with any other architecture in just 6 clicks. And joining from Prophase, as well as our guest speaker, is Mr. Vaisakh. So Vaisakh is the CEO and Chief Architect of Prophase Technologies. He is a member of an international hacking community called RuxCon, which is a computer security conference that brings together the best and the brightest security talent within the Oz Pacific region. So with the experience gained from various corporates and his own insights, he started Prophase, the new phase of security. Before we start with the presentation, let me invite Mr. Dushyant from Onefede to speak a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Sejal. Thanks for the introduction. And I would, once again like to welcome everyone who has joined this Wednesday Wisdom event. In fact, as Sejal already mentioned, so Onefede and Cyberfreight, we are, together driving this series of webinars, Wednesday Wisdom, and there will be many more, coming in pipeline. I once again welcome all of you and encourage all of you to join, this series, not only just, the today's, but, the others forthcoming as well. You will keep learning more from Cyberthreat team about the upcoming sessions. I would like to do a very quick introduction about Onefede and then hand it over to Vaisakh, who is, today's guest speaker. And it's, I think, a privilege to, have this session with Vaisakh. So even I'm looking forward, to, his words. But before that, a very quick introduction about Onefede. So Onefede is a cybersecurity startup, and what we are trying to do is disrupt the current market, in a different way, which is more or less, driven by a channel-driven model. Whereas, Onefede is a B2B cybersecurity marketplace. So wherein we are bringing niche and emerging cybersecurity technologies onto our platform, which is onefede.com, wherein you can register with your business email and learn about all the different niche and emerging cybersecurity solutions that we bring on our platform. And we would love to work with you, understand what are your cybersecurity challenges, or where you are in your journey to the zero trust architecture, and help you guys with the solutions which are designed to address specific problem statements. Okay, so I would encourage all of you to visit onefede.com, register with your business email, and allow us an opportunity to work with you guys. The value proposition what Onefede brings on table is that we are a vendor neutral advisory. So depending on your cybersecurity requirement, we can recommend the best of the breed solution that would help solve the specific problem areas. And since we are working in a very different model wherein we engage you directly with the OEMs, there are definitely other benefits, like we can say 20% or plus savings on the cost. Okay, because this is not going through the traditional channel driven model of the distributors and resellers, etc. So that's in a very nutshell about Onefede. If you have any queries, definitely you can post in the chat box. We can address those queries at the end after Vaisakh presentation is over. And if you need, my email ID is Dushyant at saram.co.in. It's SARM, saram.co.in, because our company name is Saram Innovation, but the portal is Onefede. So with that, I would, just, like to stop here and, hand it over to Vaishak, because, I understand you all have, joined this session to learn and, listen from Vaishak. So, Vaishak, thanks again for joining, taking out, your valuable time for this session. And I think, people are eager to, listen from your side. Okay. So thank you. And I hope all of you will enjoy the session. Over to you, Vaishak.
Thanks, Dushyant, for the introduction and Sejal for the same. So, good afternoon or good evening, everybody, to join the meeting. So, of course, just one thing which came to me in my mind right now is everybody talks about investment and all, right? So, I think the biggest investment is the time investment. So, you are finding in your valuable day of the time, hour of the day, you just finding few 30 minutes, 1 hour you're spending with this session is important. So I respect that on that sense. Now, I think once again, thanks for the Cyber Frat and the Onefede team for this opportunity. And they have named this event as, this series of events as Wednesday Wisdom, right? So, so of course, it's a very good name. So, so once you get out of this webinar, you should have some wisdom in your mind with respect to the cyber security or whatever, right? So I hope I do justice to that on this session. So today the topic name is given is advanced web security. So of course, don't get afraid by the term advanced and all. I'm not going to make things very complex for you guys. Just want to make it simple and straightforward so that you should understand what's happening in industry and what, from the security standpoint, what has to be done, right? So typically, if you look at cyber security in general, there are many layers of security, right? There's endpoint security, the email security, the server security, the web security, the PAM, then all kind of SIEM, XOR. A lot of things are there, authentications, everything is there. It's getting out to be an expanded field, right? So initially the cyber security was just one term. The first thing we all know about antivirus, right? Everybody knows antivirus. Apart from that, now with different different branches of cybersecurity is expanding by its own, because the cyber threats are increasing day by day, and we all are aware about many incidents happening in our country itself, right? So there are a lot of things to cover in cybersecurity as such, but my focus is more on the web application security. So here, my point was, within the web application security, there are many things to cover. So here, I would like to cover the API security part, right? So because if you look at everything, the entire world is driven by APIs. There is not a single web application or a company or whatever. APIs are used. The one thing which coming to my mind directly is the let's say the flight booking, right? So consider a scenario of a flight booking. So you just select the place from where you have to fly and to and from, and then it will get you all the list of flights, airlines, the timing, the fare. So let's consider the case of an airline booking platform. It integrates with multiple airlines with their different APIs for fare, the timing, availability, right? All those things. So it's completely integrated platform. So if you look at any platform, it's completely API integration, right? So typically, maybe if you look at 10 years back or something, you can see that in your web application, you got the monolithic web application with all the things. But right now, you integrate many things. You just need to have a framework, and you integrate different things from different parts. That is called APIs, right? You call the APIs from different vendors, and you integrate into your platform, and you make your product, right? And within your application, you have different APIs, whatever it is, logistics, manufacturing. You might be surprised. We work with many manufacturing companies. They have kind of, we see from outside we see them as conventional brick and mortar company, right? But when you enter the digital transformation has been already happened. Many of them have 500 to 600 APIs for their day-to-day work. So APIs are becoming very important. But at the same time, since APIs are being exposed to the internet, I think 80% of the APIs are exposed to the internet. That is also an entry point for the hackers to come in, right? So the security of this is very important. And recently, I'm not naming the companies. Recently, also, few of the one of the big company in India got hacked, and the millions of data, the customer data, that means our data, has been breached outside, and of course these data are being sold in dark nets and things like that, right? So it's becoming a great concern for all of us. So API security, we should know it. I know that most of you are not deep tech level guys or a cyber security, and some of them are obviously yes, but on the high level, when you're dealing with your management or your team is coming to report you on this, this awareness, it'll be great if you have this awareness on the mind. So when you select products based on that, then you have all these questions. Okay, do you have this? Do you have that? What is this all about? All these security process you should be able to know after hearing this webinar, right? So typically, before coming deep into API security, and please don't be afraid. I'm not going to make one entire hour to do this. I will close this in maybe 30 minutes time. Just make it in high level, right? So before coming to application, API security, I would like you to know about what APIs are. Most of you might already know it. I already given an introduction, but I will just go by the slide, right? Okay. So of course, I already explained this APIs which interfaces your applications between them, right? So that's what API does. There's some issues. Okay. So if you look at my screen is fully visible, or yeah, okay. All right. So if you look the APIs are getting communicated from different edge devices. Edge devices can be your cell phone in your hand. If you look at all your mobile applications, right? So when you recharge your phone, when you do some shopping purchase or whatever, right? So the APIs are getting communicated, right? So what you see on the mobile app is the front end. The back end is always an API call to their servers. So if it's a gaming console, if you look at the Tesla and all, right? So it's a completely the driverless cars. This API communication is happening, right? So what happens if an API getting hacked? So that is the one downside of all those things. So it's completely API communication with the edge devices. Not with the websites or web applications, but everything is getting into online, right? Your smart home, smart office, everything is an API communication. Your CCTV camera is doing an API communication, right? So you talk about IoT, it is also an API driven thing, right? So API is important everywhere. It's used throughout the industry in different places. So I would like to stress you about one more topic here, because it is relevant in the context. So typically, you might have heard about microservices, Dockers. So this is a new revolution thing in the industry, right? So conventionally, we buy a dedicated server and we install things on it and we deploy our application on it and you run the business, right? Now that methodology or that architecture in the production is turning to microservices. So typically, it's like microservices, as the name signifies, you can see that it's microservices. A big monolithic component is being split into multiple parts, and it's called as microservices. And there are many platforms like Dockerization of the workloads. You heard that term, like the Dockers are small. One service is a Docker. A Docker can be a single service, and there's a platform which manages all the Dockers are called as Kubernetes. You might have heard about this term as well. So the microservices driven architecture is covering the entire world right now. I would say 60 to 70% of the entire enterprise is converted into Kubernetes or microservices driven architecture. So there is a relationship between microservices and APIs. That is what I'm trying to say, because API, as I said, APIs are small pieces, and of course microservices are which holds, it's a container for those APIs. So that's how it's both of them are related. So typically, you can see a high-level diagram. I'm not going to go deep and make you complicated on this. Typically, there are different services which is within a container, as I said right now. So now the Devops, so typically you might have heard this term a lot since last 3-4 years. So there is no, previously there were, the system administrators and there is programmers, right? So there are two sections of any company, but right now a new genesis of people called Devops. So I mean, it's a campaign development operations, right? So that is where this comes. So I mean, the modern day, I mean, they call it as shift left perspective. You are moving more to the left, where the operations and I mean, development and operations are combined together, right? So that is where because the programmer who needs to do the APIs need to know the system level things as well. So that's what it does. So it's a DevOps driven architecture as well. So this entire API, this thing, right? So yeah, so this is what I was telling that. So typically in the past we had this thing what you see on the left side, because you have an entire monolithic application and there's a database connectivity. And I mean, what is different was the database. Okay, you have a database and you have an application, that's it. So now it's getting split into small components, as you see on the right side, right? So everything is different. Every functionality is different. Like login is a service, authentication is a service, registration is a service. Each and every business process of the application is a service. All these are API driven. So that is how the API is coming into picture. So it's we call it as a journey from monolithic architecture to microservices architecture. So now let me come to the topic of today's session on the API security. So typically, how this can be secured. So what all the common methodologies adopted by the products and the people to avoid the breaches, right? So this is very important typically. So why it is important? Because typically when you publish an API, so as I said, integration, let's say consider the case of an online booking website, so flight booking website or train booking website. So I mean, not the flight, train, hotels and everything is integrated through APIs, right? So typically when you publish an API, you have to give the documentation. So the documentation is accessible to the developers, so as it is accessible to the hackers as well, right? So I mean, in maybe 80% of the cases, the API is a public API, so you have to give the documentation. But there are APIs which is built internally only for few people. It should be private and not many people know that way. But in most of the cases, you can see that it's been outside. It's available on the internet, and hackers can also read this, right? They're also human beings, right? So they can also read this, and they can they will get more information. Okay, this is the methods of the API, and this is the request which I have to send to this API. So they can do some fuzzing on it, and they can attack it or hack it, right? So that is one point. Number two, of course, APIs directly expose the application logic and data, no doubt about it, right? So the ultimate purpose of APIs is to do the data transfer between different organizations or different entities, right? So there is data is there. So data, as everybody says, the new oil of the century. I mean, oil of the decade or the times, right? So here it's very important, and it's directly exposed. Now, absolutely, it will the documentation availability and everything will make the attack surface easy for the hackers to enumerate, right? So that is what is said here. So there are some guidelines which is given by OWASP Foundation, so which is an organization for the web application security, right? So they have different controls given, guidelines given to the developers about they will change this every now and then. Every 3 years they will change this, and this is in this slide I've shown the OWASP top 10, and there is OWASP top 10 API as well, right? So there are specifications. So these days, the concept is that the security is not the responsibility of a particular product. The security should the coding itself. The people who are coding should be aware about the best security practices. Typically, people these days they just copy paste. That is the thing. They copy paste things from the Google and does it in the code and do it, right? We never know any vulnerability already there. So of course there are different tools like check marks, Vaisakh to scan the code, and different levels of SSDLC. You can call it as secure software development lifecycle, right? So that means there are different security products at different level. Of course, Onefede have a package of all those products in their product line, right? So there are different tools which will do the security, which will have the responsibility to do the security at that times, right? Different layers of software development lifecycle. So typically, the security should. My point is, the security should start from the coding itself, and the developer should be aware about the best practices to do. Then on top of it, different stages like deployment. during the deployment, what all security things has to be done, and on the production, what all things has to be done, the packaging, right? So everything, the security is important. There are different tools to do this at different events, right? Okay. So I was talking about OS top 10, and so typically on a high level, what all the common API security best practices, right? So I'm an API developer. I develop an API. So I should use either tokens. I should encrypt. I should of course be aware about the vulnerabilities of the third-party libraries I'm using in the API. Then I should use some quotas and throttling. Like I don't allow unlimited access to the application, to the API, so that everybody they will window time to try out different things. So I should have a limit on this. So that's a very good practice in fact. And of course using an API gateway, which I will cover on the coming slides. So of course authentication management of the API has to be done. So that is what API gateway is all about. So typically API key, different types of authentications are there. The basic authentication is there. The OpenID authentication is there. So there are different practices done there. Then I would like to say about zero-day attack, right? I think most of you guys might be aware of this. Zero-day attack means that attack which is not listed in any of the security bulletins, which is not known to the public. So whenever a vulnerability is disclosed, let's say Microsoft found a vulnerability, they will report it to an authority called CVE. So CVE will give a number. The organization will give a CVE number. That CVE number defines the type of attack and what all versions of the products getting affected and what is the remedy and all those things are mentioned. So those attacks which doesn't have that information, that means only it is circulating between only few sets of a group of people, and they are doing it in the wild. It's called a zero-day attack. So typically why I mentioned zero-day attack, because APIs are the one which is getting affected by this a lot, because APIs are more these days. Maybe that's one of the reasons. So so typically these are the characteristics of the zero-day attack. Of course different methods are adopted. One single vulnerability is executed in multiple ways, right? So different points, geographical different points, and most of we talk about automation these days, right? So from my experience, I mean, the hackers are the ones who does the automation at its best than any other programmer who's working for a corporate company. So they do a lot of automations on spreading the attacks and all those things. It's very important on this topic. All right. So the people, everybody knows that different categories of people. I mean, some people want to, hacktivists, you call it. They want to have their slogan out in the world. I mean, they will do that. Cyber criminals, of course, the rivalry between the corporates, the big problem, right? So with respect to API security, this is also very important, right? So competitor A, competitor B. I mean, this incidents like this happened a lot in the Western countries where the competitor tries to attack the other company. So we have to be secure. We have to protect our IP on that thing, the cyber warfare, because that the recent, the Ukraine, the Russia war happened. So typically what happens, like in a war, what happened is that the first, the artillery will go into the ground and do all the things, and it will be supported by the Air Force, right? That's how the war starts. But these days, the war starts by cyber attacks. The first you attack the country using, make all their services. I mean, they do DDoS attack, denial of service attack, to make sure that all their communications are stopped. And then after that, they will do the physical work. So I mean, it's getting the cybersecurity is getting a run everywhere, right? So this is very important. So typically, let me go into the core topic about securing APIs. So so there are different kinds of things can be done on securing the APIs. So typically, if you look at any architecture, there should be between the user and API, there should be some middleman should be there, right? Some application in between, which should manage the request and response happening inside the API. Of course, like what I said, it's good to have the programmers have a good experience in doing a secure coding to make sure that their code is secure, the API is secure. That can be done always. But what happens, the library they are using, should have a vulnerability, right? So let's say I'm doing a perfect secure coding myself. But what happened is that the library I used, let's say the library I used for PDF generation, having a 0-day vulnerability, what can I do? So there is no other way, right? So of course, apart from all those typical secure coding practices you do, you need to have a middleman in between. That is, whatever product will come in between, it should have these kind of functionalities, right? It should do the validation, it should have the the filtering of the content, it should have the rate limiting, the quota setting, it should have the content security. All those things should be there in between. Authorization, authentication, authorization, everything should be there in between. So that's how the general idea goes in that way. All right, so typically you can see that the single sign-on, everybody knows it. I mean, Google, Facebook, all are single sign-on products, and there are third-party industry-grade products like Okta, and everything is there, right? So single sign-on from the authentication part. There are OpenID related products. OpenID is an authentication mechanism, right? So you can use those for authentication. So that will secure your APIs to start with. Then, of course, the restriction of the API. So you can have a licensing scheme on the API. So authorization and what all capabilities you have on the API. So you can access the function A, function B, and function C, but you cannot access function D and E. So that kind of, I mean, you shouldn't allow everybody to have all access, right? It should be limited in between. So that should be done in the coding, the architecture part itself. Of course, the parameter security, you can see that when you look at the web application, it will pass us different arguments, query strings on the HTTP parameter, right? So this has to be protected, right? Make sure that people don't tamper it straight away, right? So tamper it and send malicious payloads inside that. So you have to make that kind of a message, and parameter security has to be done. So of course, the threat protection, when it comes to threat protection, I was telling about the OWASP top 10, right? So whatever security practices or products you are having for the API should have all these kind of security, like it should help stop API from denial of service attacks, different types of cross-site scripting, SQL injection, the blind SQL injection, a lot of things are there, right? So all those things need to be taken care of. And there are products like API Gateway, which will do an API management kind of a thing, right? So different types of integrations are done to the API Gateway for authentication, encryption, caching, all those things are there. So using of an API Gateway is an important add-on on this point. So just want to stress on that. And as I said, the rate limiting, of course, rate limiting is good, so that you can always restrict the number of requests that application makes on the API. So that is one thing. So typically, the content threads. So for instance, mostly if you look at APIs, they communicate using JSON request and response or an XML request and response. So there are various ways in which this content can be embedded with malwares. So the system will think it is an XML content, but inside it is a malware or a ransomware which can enter into. So of course, you need to have integrations with antivirus or malwares in the API server, so that this kind of content threats can be avoided. Right. So of course, the new set of products which came into the limelight, maybe the Gartner said about this in 2019 and 20, right? So that's where web application and API protection is called as WAP. So this set of product, I think you all might have heard about WAF, web application firewall. It is there for ages to secure your web portals and all. But WAP is web application API protection, which is designed in such a way that it secures, typically what API attacks are all about, right? It secures the system from the API attacks. So that is what the WAP is all about. So it has that specialization on securing the API request and response, right? So this is about WAP. So typically, why WAP security is important. That's the heading we have given to this slide. So typically, if you look at any cybersecurity products, I mean, this I say in each and every meeting, right? So with respect to every cybersecurity product, you heard about rules and signatures, right? So the problem with rules and signatures is that, as I said, I mean, if you have a non-vulnerability, you can have a rule, but what about a 0-day? You cannot have a rules or signature to defend that. So for that, there is some kind of learning should be there, a behavior analysis should be there. So the modern WAP product should be integrated with that kind of a behavioral learning, so that it's more kind of an application aware product, right? So the product knows the API, the characteristics of the API, and based on that, it can do the security. So that is very important for the WAP as well as the WAP is concerned. And of course, the traffic inspection is needed. That's a very important point. The encrypted traffic has to be de-encrypted and inspected before sending it to the endpoint. That is one responsibility of the WAP security. So I mean, a lot of things has to be told about this. So what I mean, the new term in cybersecurity, the cybersecurity automation and integrations with third-party intelligence and your own intelligence to get more runway onto your security capabilities, right? So next generation WAF, web application firewall, is important, right? The bots, talking about bots is one of the biggest threats we have. I mean, a lot of bots are there automatically, doing content scrapping and everything, right? So it's becoming a big problem to the industry as such. If you look at the traffic, the 60 to 70% of the traffic are bot. That means if you just say, if you're investing, let's say, $10,000 for your infrastructure, that means $7,000 are spent for the bots, because 70% of your traffic are bots. So that is also one problem, right? So this has to be secured. So of course, I'm representing Profis. So we are typically into this area, and we have an all-in-one product. I mean, it's not restricted to the WAP or WAF. I mean, it's a all-in-one web security platform which addresses almost all these scenarios I was mentioning. This, so you can have a look at our website, profis.com, and about, or if you have any questions, you can ask that also on that regards. But in general, that's all about my presentation today. Happy to answer any questions you have on this. Thanks. Over to you.
Mr. Praveer has this thing, basic function of WAF.
Yeah, so the WAF is a web application firewall. So that means typically every one of us know about the firewall, right? The network firewall. Network firewall will help you from the network-based attacks, which was not existing anymore. I mean, it is there, but since most of the the web, I mean, most of the application tends to be the web-based. The web, I was telling about web APIs becoming the latest trend, but we have the web portals, websites, your mobile application backends, everything is there. So the WAF will secure specifically for the web portals and the websites. The WAF will work. WAF can able to secure you from all the attacks. So WAF is something specific to the APIs. Whenever there's an API is in place, the WAF can help you. Okay, ECS tool is capable of automate web app scan like OS top 10. Okay, let me tell you the difference between web application scanner and the WAF. That's a very good question. So many people confuse. Okay, we have a scanner, we have a web application scanner. So why we need something else? So web application scanner is a reactive kind of a product. That means it will scan for vulnerabilities in your application and say that, hey, you got this vulnerability and you need to ask your developers to fix this, right? But WAF is something, is a proactive. That means it will real time when an attack comes, it will stop, right? So it's not I mean, web application firewall or a WAF is not a competitor, but a complementary product, right? So the WAF is something which helps you real time, and web application scanners are needed for your the quarterly audit of your application, where you need those kinds of products for your security auditing, VAPT and all. Okay. Can you suggest some standard tools for web app testing? So I think Nikhil means web application security testing, right? Not the conventional web app testing. So of course there are a lot of open source tools available. Like Nikito, Blup Suite free edition is there. So a lot of tools are there where you can there are a lot of GitHub projects are there. Small GitHub projects are there. If you can Google for web application security scanner GitHub, you will get a bunch of tools. And of course with the Kali Linux, the Kali Linux distribution, there are a lot of tools are inbuilt to it for web application scanning or in general cybersecurity, but there are a lot of tools which can help you with the web application scanning. You can look Google for Kali tools, then you will get a list of tools, SQL injection and everything is there, right? So with that. So Umesh asking for what is OAuth. OAuth is an authentication mechanism. It's an open source authentication mechanism for, so this is taken as a standard by different vendors, private vendors, open source vendors and all. So everybody can speak the same language. So that is advantage. WAF blocks, Manish asking, WAF blocks OWASP top 10. So does it ideally block all API attacks by default? Yes, it can block API attacks by default. There is no problem, but there is more, from our experience. So we are as we are running a Waff company, I mean, we started with the Waff, but then we realized that API needs more specific cases, use cases, like as I said about the content security, there are request and response, the payload. So there are some specific things which has to be addressed, which cannot be done by the Waff. So that is why a Waff is also needed. So Waff and Waff together is a good combination. But for API, Waff alone will do. So that's what we understand. Okay. What is your different from other WAF in market? Okay, what is the difference between profiles is that, I touched on a point where, the zero-day attack, right? The rules and signatures are needed for the conventional cybersecurity product to work, or the conventional WAF to work. But profiles is more kind of an ML based product. We just understand each and every application. We create a profile of those applications using big data, AI and ML, and if in variation to that happening, let's say, we profile an application and we know how the typical behavior of that application is all about. And if any changes happening to that application, typically the anomaly score will increase. So we are leveraging the machine learning to accomplish that. So that's a big difference of the product. And there are a lot of other differentiation is there. So we built entirely on the Kubernetes architecture, the microservices architecture, and it's the first distributed WAF technology, right? So it can scale itself automatically. So a lot of things are there. It's a multi-cloud thing. So a lot of things are there. I can, if you email me, I can give you the details more on this. Okay, where we Anshul is asked a question, where do we put this in infra? Is this placed right next to the gateway and reverse proxy? And is this as a SaaS product? Okay, I think there are vendors which have only a SaaS option where you need to change the DNS to their server, and from there it will come to your infra, right? So that is one way of it. But if you have an on-prem solution, it will be like it has to be put just in front of your application. So I don't because there is no point in putting in front of the reverse proxy or whatever. Just in front of your application, let the traffic. Then the API call should go to them. It should be in front of the application. That's the right way of putting it. Okay. Yeah. Stay tuned as we have Amazon Kindle. Of course, yes, it's coming up. Are you saying that we need to have both WAF and WAP, or WAP will replace WAF? No. If you have a web portal, web applications, websites, WAF is needed, right? And if you have APIs, the WAP is needed. That's the difference. So of course, WAF stands good, typically these days as well, because not everything is API, but there are websites and web applications are there. So of course, it needs a WAF. So how to bypass WAF? So Shailesh asked this question. Is how to bypass WAF when doing penetration testing. Of course, there are many methods available. You can Google for it, right? So it's a cat and mouse game always. So what is the difference between WAF and firewall? I think I explained that. Conventionally, the network firewall is the one we have had for many decades. But right now, for specific to your application, there is a firewall is needed. That is called as WAF. Okay. Is there any, Nikhil is asking, is there any requirement to have source code review if you are doing web app security scanning, or both is recommended for better security? Obviously, both is recommended for better security, but at least you need to have a web application security scanning or a VAPT activity is done, so that even though there is some vulnerability in the code, it can be fixed on the before reaching it, it can be blocked, right? You will get it. How to bypass WAF when injecting and payload for penetration testing? So I think I have answered to this. So there are different methods to do that. But it's always a cat and mouse game, because WAF vendors will come with a patch like us, so it's always difficult. Best vendor for WAF, does it come in integration with WAF? So I'm not answering that question because I represent a WAF company. So it's not fair to me to say that Profit is the best product, right? So yeah. Can we identify using WAF which kind of attacks hacker has done, like investigating the logs? Yes. So that's a very good thing. A very good question, Prashant. So yes. So actually, in Profit's interface, we are giving that option to know what kind of attack, what kind of attack hacker did that, and what is the remediation also. So that is there in the product. Okay. Okay, Vivek is asking, WAF will having robust protection against known and unknown zero-day threats. I mean, conventional WAF not, but the modern WAF like Profess does. How you compare your product with Barracuda WAF? I can email you the comparison sheet if you need with any particular vendor. When WAF is implemented, do we specifically need WAF? Provided if you have APIs, you consume API a lot, of course you need a WAF. Because most of the offerings have WAF and WAF together, like us. Does it do real-time scanning of application like CyberShift? Okay, I mean, it's not, I said there is a confusion. Sometimes there's a confusion about what a vulnerability scanner does and what a WAF does. Scanner is more kind of scanning for vulnerabilities of the applications and giving you the fixes. That has to be done in the code level. But WAF is a proactive real-time thing. It happens, it's in the middle of the product, middle of the applications and the visitors. Okay, so I think I'm done with that question. So any other questions, you can just type it up. I think Sejal, one more question. Does it help scanning files propagating by API to detect ransomware, malware, malicious? So does it help scanning files propagating by API to detect ransomware? Yes, of course. Let's say if your API gateway got already injected and you became a source for spreading the malwares, of course, at times it's good to have an antivirus product or ransomware scanner product in the machine where you're having the API server deployed.